So the Cavaliers got busy in the trade machine as they traded their veteran sharpshooter Kyle Korver to the Utah Jazz. We will see if he will bring back the long hair look, and we'll also see if he can help out one of the most disappointing teams in the league, as the Jazz are towards the bottom of the Western Conference standings. And the first thing to note about Korver is that he's way more athletic now than he was in his original stint with Utah, and as a result, he's one of the best in the league at shooting in motion, rather than just being a catch-and-shoot kind of guy. I think the Jazz will accommodate this, as Quinn Snyder's offense has a lot of motion in it, so we'll see a lot of plays like this, where Korver is getting an off-ball screen from a big guy, and it allows him to get a shot off. Similar to what he's been doing the past few seasons with the Cavaliers. I think we'll see a lot of handoff plays that could have a similar result. This play here, if you slot in Kyle Korver, could result in a pull-up jump shot from mid-range. Right here, we have Ricky Rubio putting on his best Korver impression. This play may result in Donovan Mitchell doing whatever he wants to do, but if Kyle Korver is right there, then you know what's going to happen on this play. A similar one here, as the big does not step up on Joe Ingles, Korver would happily take this shot. And plays like that one are the first reason why I think he's going to help Utah out a lot on offense. Some interesting stats about Korver. He shoots about 60% from 3 when there is a defender between 2 to 4 feet away from him, so he's not intimidated by good contests. The second one is that he's averaging about 4.7 miles per hour on offense this year, which is second amongst players named Kyle. And we all know that that's important. The next thing we have to look at with the Jazz offense is that they run a lot of pick and rolls. They are towards the top of the league in pick and roll frequency. They were, I believe, number 1 last season. And this one is not as complex to figure out. When a team runs a lot of high screens, the defenders have to collapse, and if you've got shooting amongst the corners, then, well, Kyle Korver will definitely help you out there, as he has shot over 40% from 3 on catch and shoots for pretty much his entire career. This play right here, where Rubio gets the ball to the guy in the corner, just picture Kyle Korver in that spot. I think this is also going to help out Donovan Mitchell a lot, because his percentages have been a bit rough this season. Now, I think some of that is just because he perhaps attempts too many mid-rangers, too many floaters, but I also think it's because the Jazz spacing is not always the best, whereas when you have now one of the best shooters of all time, then that is of course going to make Donovan Mitchell's day just a little bit easier. I'm also intrigued because I think this could allow Utah to go just a little bit further away from the Derek Favors with Rudy Gobert lineups, which has killed their offense a lot of the time. It's pretty much a given at this point that they're just a better team with Jay Crowder playing next to Rudy than Favors. It's just where the NBA is at this point. And now that they just have another wing in Korver, I just think that makes it a little bit easier for you to have modern-day lineups, right? Also, the fact that if Crowder's three-pointer comes back to life, then that could give you quite a few knockdown shooters between him, Korver, and then, of course, Joe Ingles. I mean, that could make Utah's offense pretty impressive, which is something that they have been longing for this season. When you have just as many floor spacers as you can have, and a creator like Mitchell, and then a roller like Gobert, and then guys like Ingles and Korver and Crowder can space out, good things can happen. Now, another problem with Utah is that their defense has been pretty bad this season. Well, bad by their standards, I guess. They've suffered a couple of massive blowouts to Indiana. Of course, there was the big one to the Mavericks. Now, clearly they traded for Korver to help out their offense, and I'm going to guess that they're hoping that by scoring more, that will allow them to set their defense more often, and as a result, could improve them there. But if we're expecting Kyle Korver to step in and suddenly teams are going to stop putting up 120-point nights against these guys, that's probably not going to happen. It's still going to be a team effort for these guys to figure it out defensively, because if they're not a great defensive team, then they're not going to be a real contender in the West. They may not even make the postseason in the Western Conference. So we have to still manage our expectations. But in terms of offense, I think Korver is definitely going to help these guys out and Perhaps this is step one towards them turning this season around. Now, I am going to talk a little bit more without the real footage, because I want to talk about two other things. The first one is, I'm really intrigued by the idea of Donovan Mitchell at point guard with Korver at the 2 and then Ingles and Crowder in there, because I think that gives you the most amount of shooting possible. Because Rubio, I mean, he of course makes plays for these guys, and I would like to think that they are still a better team with him in there. Like, he doesn't have the problems that Derek Favors has. But even so, the defense is going to respect Donovan Mitchell more than they are Rubio, right? So that could just open up even more shooting for some of your wings. And again, we don't know if Crowder's jump shot that 1 year with the Celtics was just a mirage, but he's definitely a willing shooter, and if it starts going in more, that'd be awesome. But he's shooting like 28% from outside this year, so who really knows? The other thing is, could this trade end up blowing up in the Jazz face if any of those second rounders that they moved end up being a big deal? Now, there's a chance Alec Burks could end up being a big deal as well for Cleveland, but, you know, through injuries and just kind of losing out of the rotation and not being like totally the best fit for Mitchell and Rubio and all that, I guess it makes sense to swap Burks for Korver. Even so, I could see him getting up to being that mid-teens and potentially even a little bit higher than that scorer that we saw through stretches of his time with the Jazz. But even then, it might not like really be a big loss for them. But the other thing is that second-round pick that they're trading that originally belonged to the Wizards. What year is that? 2021, I want to say. Look, the Wizards situation right now could go in 9 million different directions, okay? They could make some trade that fixes the whole team. They could end up making a trade that makes it even worse. I mean, maybe the team looks totally different than it does right now in 3 seasons, but they're actually pretty good. Maybe they're a complete disaster. And I think like there is at least a chance that they could be a pretty bad team in a few seasons. And if that's the case, then that second-round pick that you traded for a 37-year-old could end up being like a really good second, to the point where it's basically a late first-rounder, right? So maybe it could end up being like the 34th pick in the draft or something. And of course, we've seen guys get drafted in the top 10 and be great, as well as be horrible. We've seen guys go undrafted that end up being great players, so it doesn't matter where you're technically picking, like you can always nail it. But of course, you've got a better chance with the 30-something pick than like the 48th or something. So I think that's something we should at least care about. Sure, we're going to forget about it, and I'm going to forget about it by next week. But who knows? Maybe in 3 years, it's like, oh crap, the Cavaliers got themselves like a damn good player with the 32nd pick in the draft because the Wizards suck. Now, they could end up being good, you know. I'm not saying it's a guarantee they're going to be bad, but the current situation, look, if they climb out of this within 3 years, then props to them. So it's a bit of a risk. As far as the other pick that the Jazz sent over, which is, I believe, their own pick in 2020, I mean, a similar thing can be said, I guess, because it's not like the Jazz are setting the world on fire right now, but you have to assume at that point Donovan Mitchell is, what, in his 5th season, 4th season, whatever it is. And then, you know, you'll still have Rudy. Like, you have to guess you're going to be a pretty decent team. So, yeah, these are just little risks that could end up being nothing, could end up being something. We don't know. But I think they're worth talking about nonetheless.